Hello, romance book lovers. Welcome to Tales from the Heart. I'm Jenna Harte, and each week I post new episodes from my stories of crime and passion. Right now, we're listening to With This Ring, I Thee Kill, Book 3 of the Valentine Mysteries. This week is episode 1, Chapter 1, where a new mystery begins. If you'd like to read along or get ahead in the story, you can get With This Ring I Thee Kill from your favorite ebook retailer, or you can save by buying direct from me. Now, With This Ring I Thee Kill is the third book in the series. If you missed book 1, Deadly Valentine, you can listen by checking earlier episode postings, or if you'd like to read it, you can get the book for free at my website at jennaharte.com. Now, book 2, Old Flames Never Die, is also available in early episode postings, or you can purchase at your favorite ebook retailer, or again, for less through my shop. Now, Tales from the Heart is posted to podcast platforms and YouTube each week. These episodes are edited to censor out the intimate content. But if you'd like to have a version that includes the spicier bits, plus get early access, behind the scenes information about the stories, bonus content, and more, please join me over on Ream Stories. You can learn more over at reamstories.com/Jenna Harte. Now, never miss the mystery or romance by hitting the subscribe button, and remember, all the details and links you might need are just a click away in the description. Now snuggle up, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Chapter 1. Tess walked up the steps of the large country home. She'd finally settled on the idea that Jack's home was hers as well. It had taken nearly losing him once because he'd had enough of her craziness, and once because he'd been shot. For her to realize that as scary as love could be, it was worse trying to live without him. Tess entered the house to the sound of Etta James's "I Just Want to Make Love to You" wafting down from upstairs. That could only mean one thing. Jack was in a romantic mood. Her heart skipped a beat at what he might have in store for her. She headed up the stairs and into their bedroom. She half expected him to be posed naked on the bed, perhaps with a box of chocolate hiding his real treasure. But the bed was empty. The music continued to flow. She followed it, walking through their room to the sun porch. The sweltering heat of the June day was subsiding. With the ceiling fan, the porch was nearly comfortable. Jack sat next to a table. A bucket of ice with champagne rested by his side. When he saw her, he smiled, and as always, it sent her heart soaring. He had the most amazing smile, with a single, beguiling dimple. The only thing that could distract from it was his unique blue-green eyes. He stood, took her in his arms, and greeted her with a thorough kiss that sent her blood racing and her bones melting.
How was your day?
He nuzzled against her neck.
Huh?
Not much could get through the fog Jack's kisses created in her brain. He laughed.
Everything okay down in Deputy Dan land?
He referred to her friend, and Jack's sometimes nemesis, Detective Daniel Showalter.
All is well. I think I should charge them more, though.
I'm sure you're right. You've only helped solve 2 cases for them in the last few weeks.
Tess hadn't officially decided to work as a legal consultant. She'd been willing to work for free when Jack's former lover, Liv Danforth, involved him in murder. Tess played a significant role in solving the crime, and since then had been asked to consult on 2 cold cases. This time she charged a fee. While she didn't need the money, she didn't want to be idle, living off Jack or the more than ample trust fund from her grandparents.
What's going on here?
Tess scanned the romantic scene he'd set.
Are we celebrating?
Every day.
Although it was schmaltzy, Tess's insides always went gooey when he talked like that. He made her feel like the center of the universe. She had slowly come to believe him.
I have something for you.
He took her hand, leading her to the table where he picked up a small bakery box.
Raiding my confections again?
I prefer your bonbons.
Tess lifted a brow.
Naughty.
I did snatch one truffle.
He handed her the box.
You're giving me a truffle I made?
He nodded.
Generous, aren't I?
His eyes twinkled with happiness and something more. Intrigued, she opened the box. Sitting on top of the truffle held by piped frosting sat a heart-shaped sapphire and diamond ring. Her eyes immediately went to his. He smiled, taking the ring from the top of the truffle.
You already said yes.
Tess swallowed the lump in her throat. She had indeed said yes when he'd asked her to marry him as he lay bleeding and dying weeks before. She hadn't expected a ring, as she didn't feel she needed one. But it was something he would do. Of the two of them, he was the more romantic.
I thought we should make it official.
He finished, wiping the remnants of frosting off the ring and sliding it on her finger.
It wasn't official before.
She looked into eyes as brilliant as the gems he'd just put on her finger.
Yes, but you need a ring.
It's beautiful.
It took me forever to find the right ring. I've been looking for weeks.
The right ring?
I couldn't get you just any ring. You have to wear it for the rest of your life. Hand it down to our children. It needed to be special.
Tess smiled at the idea he chose a ring not just to represent love and commitment, but as something enduring, an heirloom.
It's perfect.
He pulled her to him, kissing her as if it were the first time, the last time. A kiss for all time. It ended only because they needed to breathe. He stared at her in a look she'd come to recognize.
We're not having champagne now, are we?
No.
He swept her up in his arms and carried her to their bedroom.
I want to consummate this deal before you have a chance to change your mind.
That only works once we're married.
It should be binding on engagements, too.
I'll have to look that up in my law books.
Later.
He tossed her on the bed.
Much later.
She was all right with that. It's not like consummation was a hardship. No, far from it. Jack was the epitome of alpha male, with his tall, lean body, charm, and overconfidence that made him endearing more than annoying. It still amazed her that he'd chosen her, that he loved her so deeply. And now he was promising to love her forever. Her fingers stopped over the small scar that now branded his abdomen. It was a reminder of how close she'd come to losing him, at how much losing him would have cost her. It had been her fault he was shot, so guilt intertwined with her feelings. She leaned over, brushed her lips over the scar, a penance that didn't seem quite enough.
Hey.
Jack's soft voice called to her.
It's not your fault. Liv was the one with the gun.
Of course he'd know what she was thinking. She'd had nightmares that the day he was shot hadn't turned out so well. Then there was the constant replaying of the situation in her mind, knowing if she'd acted differently, he wouldn't have been shot at all. If she hadn't tried to knock the gun out of Liv's hand at that moment, or in that way, maybe it wouldn't have gone off and struck him. His hands on her cheeks brought her back to him.
You know, if I hadn't been shot, we might not be here right now.
She frowned.
I told you in New York that I was all in, that I was committed to you and our relationship.
I know, but maybe we wouldn't be engaged. Just because you were all in doesn't mean you were ready for marriage.
She supposed he was right.
I can't tell you how many times in New York I wanted to ask you, but I thought it was too much too soon. After all, days before, our relationship was practically over.
I guess you're right.
It was his turn to frown.
Are you sure about this? I asked you to marry me when I thought I might be dying, and you said yes, probably just to make me feel better.
She shook her head.
I meant it when I said yes. I didn't like the timing, but I wasn't giving in to a dying man's wish.
Are you sure?
Absolutely. You're right that maybe we wouldn't be engaged right now if you hadn't been shot, but the shooting only sped up the inevitable. It put everything in perspective. I love you. I want everything you've always said you wanted for us. My fears had me putting the brakes on to slow things down. But I was always heading in this direction.
She smiled.
You can't get out of now, Valentine. I'm going to marry you.
He smiled, dimple and all.
So maybe we can get back to the consummation part.
Now he really did have everything he wanted. It had weighed on him that maybe her agreement to get married was only to appease him because he'd been shot, and she didn't feel she could back out. That's why the ring had been so important to him. Asking her a second time gave her the opportunity to change her mind. The ring, if she chose to wear it, was a symbol that she'd said yes. This time, there'd been no hesitancy or worry in her amber eyes. But hearing her say the words to him, "I'm going to marry you," lifted a weight and made his heart soar.
I love you, Tess.
Tess woke with the sun's rays shining over their bed. What a night, she thought. They should get engaged more often. She turned her head toward Jack, sleeping beside her. She rolled to him, resting her head on his chest to hear the steady rhythm of his heart. It was amazing and terrifying how much she loved him. She wouldn't have imagined it possible. When he'd been shot, all her worries and fears about loving him were vanquished. It became so clear that her life, her happiness was wrapped up in Jack Valentine, and all she could do was trust in him and in herself that they'd build a lifetime of happiness. She knew that 99% of the world would agree that Jack Valentine was a keeper of a man. The only holdouts might be Daniel, and most certainly her parents, who put more value on pedigree than character.
Your thinking is waking me up.
He mumbled. She lifted her head. One of his brilliant blue-green eyes peeked at her.
You better not be changing your mind.
I couldn't even if I wanted to. I'm wearing the ring.
And we had consummation sex.
Tess laughed.
Yes, that too.
His arms wrapped around her, pulling her until she was splayed on top of him.
Seriously, are you having doubts?
She shook her head.
Not one. I'm just thinking about my parents.
You haven't mentioned anything to them yet?
She shook her head.
I know they won't care, but I have to tell them. And being the socially conscious people they are, they'll want a hand in the wedding.
And you'd rather give those duties to Helen and Tom?
He referred to the surrogate parents who had loved and cared for her since she was a teenager.
They deserve it more, but I guess I'm socially conscious too. What kind of daughter would I be if I didn't let my parents know I was getting married or not invite them to the wedding?
You wouldn't be the first daughter to not invite her parents to the wedding. I won't care what anyone thinks, so it's up to you.
She studied Jack for a long minute.
See anything you like?
My parents aren't going to like you.
Hey.
He gave her a light pinch.
I'm quite a catch.
But you're nouveau riche. I don't think that will cut it with them.
I don't understand how they don't recognize what a tremendous woman they have for a daughter.
Tess shrugged.
I think I'm over it now. I have you and Helen and Tom. I don't need more family than that.
And don't forget Cora.
He said about the woman he'd grown up thinking of as a close family friend, but who, they discovered recently, was his biological grandmother.
No one can forget Cora. I'm certain she doesn't think I'm a tremendous woman, but perhaps she'll forgive me for hurting you someday.
I know what can help.
His hands caressed her back.
What?
Grandchildren.
She already has a grandchild.
Great-grandchildren then, but before we take that on,
Jack started.
I want to get married, and maybe have a year or two with you to myself.
That can be arranged, but first I need to take a shower.
Do you need help?
Not this time, champ, but I could use coffee.
At your service.
Jack watched as she disappeared in the bathroom. How the hell did he get so lucky? He thought about joining her in the shower despite what she said, but decided to start breakfast instead. He slipped on a pair of pants and a t-shirt and headed downstairs to the kitchen. He filled the coffee press with fragrant dark grounds and covered them with boiling water. Then his thoughts turned to breakfast. Omelets or pancakes? He was looking in the fridge when he heard a knock at the door. Leaving the breakfast decision until later, he headed towards the front door.
Mr. Valentine?
Asked one of the two men standing on the porch. They both wore dark suits, but one of them tugged at his collar, giving Jack the impression that a suit was not his usual attire. Or maybe it was because at 8:30 in the morning, the temperature was already nearing 90, and humidity hung heavy in the air.
Yes?
Mr. Valentine, we're with Backland Insurance. I'm Tim Fitch, and this is Cal Wigman. We would like to speak with you regarding a ring you bought recently.
What about it?
We have some questions related to its sale.
Jack couldn't explain his hesitation, but something wasn't right.
If we could just have a moment of your time.
The second man said.
It will only take a few minutes. It's just a formality since the ring has changed hands.
Jack didn't buy it. The only reason he could think insurance people, if that's what they were, would be asking about a ring was that it was stolen. But he'd bought the ring new from a jeweler, so how could it be stolen?
Perhaps we can make an appointment,
Jack suggested.
We could, but we have families, and we'd like to get this resolved and back home as soon as possible. I'm sure you understand,
Tim said. Reluctantly, Jack opened the door to let them in.
I'm guessing congratulations are in order,
Tim stated once they'd gathered in the living room. Jack regarded him. While he did give the ring as an engagement ring, it was a ring that could be used for other purposes.
Yes, thank you.
Jack gestured for them to sit down.
And your bride-to-be, is she here?
No, she had to work. How can I help you?
Jack couldn't put his finger on what was unsettling about the two men, but he didn't want them knowing Tess or the ring was there. He hoped Tess stayed upstairs long enough for him to get rid of them.
Yes. Well, the ring has a long line of ownership, the most recent of which has reported it stolen.
Jack cursed under his breath. He was disappointed that he'd have to let go of the ring, but more than that, alarms were ringing. A long line of ownership? Possibly stolen?
I bought the ring from a local jeweler.
At the time of your purchase, did the jeweler tell you anything about the piece?
Cal asked.
Like what?
Like where he got it?
No.
Jack hadn't actually talked to the jewelry store owner. One of the employees had sold him the ring. Thinking back, Jack remembered that the ring hadn't been displayed with the other jewelry, and Jack had a nagging feeling that the employee wasn't supposed to have sold it.
I see. We suspect that the last owner, the one before the jeweler, actually sold the ring, but is trying to say it was stolen.
Insurance fraud?
Jack asked, a little relieved.
Yes, it would help if we could look at the ring to make sure it's even the one we're looking for.
I gave it to her last night. She's wearing it at work. I bought the ring legally. If you have questions about it, you can contact Mr. Feinstein, the jewelry store owner.
The unsettling feeling grew again. He wanted these men out of the house before Tess came down for coffee. Tim looked squarely at Jack.
Mr. Valentine, I'm running an investigation here. While I'm sure you bought the ring without knowing its past, I have a job to do.
I appreciate that,
Jack said.
but I can't show you what I don't have.
Cal startled Jack by jumping up. He reached into his coat and pulled out a gun.
Look, Mr. Valentine. Call your girl, get the ring, or I'll kill you and your fiancé.
Cal!
Tim barked, giving Jack the impression that Cal had gone off script. Instinctively, Jack put his hands up.
I told you I don't have it.
Jack?
Jack's hopes fell as Tess entered the living area. He looked at her, and just as he did, Cal and Tim noticed the ring on her hand.
Get her! She's got the ring!
Cal said.
Get out of here.
Jack yelled at Tess as he swung his fist, hitting Cal in the face and knocking him over the couch. Jack grabbed the gun that fell on the couch. He turned it on Tim, except he wasn't there. Neither was Tess.
Tess!
Christ, would they ever catch a break and live a simple, happy life? Why was he always on the verge of losing her? He stood at the bottom of the stairs in the foyer, trying to decide if she'd have run to the back of the house or upstairs. He heard a crash coming from the back of the house. In an instant, he was running.
Tess!
Back here.
She called. He rounded the corner into the kitchen, nearly tripping over Tim sprawled on the floor, with blood oozing from his head. Jack looked up at Tess and the cast-iron frying pan in her hands.
I hit him.
She was a little giddy from shock.
Yes, you did.
I was behind the door when he ran in and I whapped him.
He pulled her to him, held her.
Remind me to never chase you through the house.
She looked up at him and he could see her eyes clear.
I'd let you catch me.
He grinned and kissed her nose.
Call the police.
He set Cal's gun on the kitchen table, then reached down to drag Tim out to the living area. He didn't want Tim or Cal out of his sight. He was dragging Tim through the foyer when he heard a sound behind him. He turned his head, but wasn't quick enough to avoid Cal's fist hitting his jaw. Jack stumbled over Tim, but was able to keep from falling.
Get up!
Cal yelled at Tim. Jack recovered and ran towards Cal, who threw another punch, effectively pushing Jack back. Cal ran out the door and Jack started after him, but the sound of Tim moving on the floor stopped him. No way was he going to leave Tess in the house with this maniac.
Tell the police one of them is getting away,
Jack called to Tess. He leaned over Tim.
Don't think about getting up.
He looked out the window to see Cal scrambling into his car.
He's in a blue sedan.
The car blew dust in the air, preventing Jack from seeing the car emblem. He looked down on Tim.
Your partner is gone. Some friend you've got, eh, buddy?
Jack, are you okay?
Tess joined him in the foyer.
I'm all right.
He checked his mouth for signs of injury.
Thank God.
Are the police coming?
Yes.
She held up her cell phone in one hand. In the other hand, she had Cal's gun.
Just in case.
Jack took the gun from her only because he felt he should. He didn't know the first thing about guns.
Rest easy there, Tim.
Jack sat on the stairs to wait for the police, hoping the throbbing in his jaw would stop. How did this happen to them? Just a few weeks ago, an old girlfriend had shot him. A few months before that, he and Tess had both been nearly killed by a butler. He knew life with Tess would be exciting, but he hadn't counted on this kind of excitement.
Are you hurt badly?
Tess sat next to him on the steps to wait for the police to arrive. She brushed her fingers over Jack's jaw where he'd been hit. He let out a hiss.
No, although some ice would be nice.
She nodded and strode into the kitchen. She came back minutes later with ice wrapped in a towel.
What did they want?
She gently pressed the ice onto his jaw. He winced and took the towel from her.
They wanted your ring.
My ring?
She looked at the brilliant sapphire and diamonds on her finger.
Why?
I don't know. They talked about it being stolen, but I think they were the ones wanting to steal it.
Tess shifted uneasily on the step next to him.
Do you think his friend will be back?
Her beautiful face was etched with fear, and he wanted to fix it.
No.
He put his arm around her and pulled her close.
The police will be here soon to gather up Tim. I'm sure his buddy is long gone.
How does this happen to us? I don't know about you, but I am not used to all this excitement.
Jack pulled her head to rest on his shoulder.
It'll be all right.
They sat quietly for a minute.
I wonder why they wanted this ring. If we knew that, we could be sure no one would try to take it again.
Jack thought out loud.
You just said he wouldn't be back.
Well, I don't think he'll be back today, but if he really wants the ring, he could try again. Maybe we can talk to Tim here.
That would be inappropriate.
You're a victim, not an attorney.
I'm always an attorney.
Okay, when we're done with Tim and the police, we can go talk to Mr. Feinstein.
No way.
Tess protested.
No more adventures.
You can stay here, I'll go alone.
She shook her head, her eyes turning defiant and fierce.
No. If you think I'm going to let you walk into a potentially dangerous situation when I've only just gotten you back, you're sadly mistaken.
Tess,
Jack said softly, his gaze holding hers.
We'll be safer if we know what's going on.
Here, let them have it.
Tess removed the ring from her finger.
No.
He took her hand in his.
Jack, I'm not starting my life with you wondering if and when someone is going to kill you or me over a silly little ring.
Jack nearly choked on her choice of words. The price he paid for that ring was nowhere near silly. In fact, it was the kind of price that made the ring all the more steel-worthy. Someone could live very nicely for years, maybe forever, on what he paid for that ring.
I bought that ring because it represented my feelings for you. I'm not going to let two goons take away the magic of what we have.
The ring didn't make the magic, Jack. We did. I don't need a ring. I don't want it. Not at this price.
She finished removing the ring and dropped it in his hand.
And if it's a deal breaker, well, I'd rather live without you knowing that you're alive than with you wondering when the next attempt on your life will be.
Jack's heart stalled for a moment. She didn't mean it, he told himself. She was stubborn and strong-willed. He loved that about her. But she loved him too. There was no way she could turn her back on him now. Could she? She'd done it before. But she wouldn't do it now. She promised she wouldn't. She was just mad and afraid. Of course he'd throw the ring out the window if keeping it meant losing her. But he felt strongly about this ring and didn't want to give up without knowing more about it.
Tess.
He took one of her hands in his, needing to touch her. He was relieved that she didn't pull away.
I'd die if I lost you. You mean everything to me.
He opened his other palm to show her the ring.
But this ring, this beautiful, mysterious, brilliant, exotic ring is your ring. I bought it because it made me think of you. It has a life, a fire in it, just like you have a fire.
Now that I have you, I don't want to lose you.
She squeezed his hand.
You aren't going to lose me. I'm perfect for you.
She looked annoyed, and yet her eyes softened.
You can't resist me.
He continued.
There's no sense trying.
She smirked.
I could, if I wanted to. This boyish charm of yours goes only so far.
He grinned at her.
You have to put up with so much from me.
It can be a chore at times.
Tell me you want me, Tess. Tell me that you love me even half as much as I love you.
You know I do.
He bent to kiss her, hoping to erase resistance or doubt.
You're my world.
He slipped the ring back on her finger.
The minute things get dangerous, I'm throwing this ring into the river.
That would be littering,
He said.
I'm not kidding, Jack. The ring will be history.
I understand.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tales from the Heart. I hope that you enjoyed it, and you will be back to find out what happens next. What is the deal with Tess's engagement ring? Now remember, you can listen to full uncensored episodes over at ringstories.com/Jenna Harte. And if you'd like to read along or get ahead in the story, you can get With This Ring, I Thee Kill from your favorite ebook retailer or save by buying direct from me. All the details and links you might need are just a click away in the description. Now don't miss the next episode. Hit the subscribe button so you'll know when it's posted. And thank you again for listening. Until next time, this is Jenna Harte wishing you peace, love, and happily ever after.